and whatever you say is going to be incomplete. So we will not try to say it. And let's start, sir. Please go ahead, sir.
I said Ajay, if he's honest, he will not be speaking the right thing, and if he's speaking the right thing, he won't be honest today. Anyway, good evening, and thanks for a nice word of introduction. At the outside, I would like to say that the topic which I'm going to talk today is not something which we practice every day. So a lot of it is going to be theoretical, but this is a very important area which we need to master if we have to do CTO cases. And I will take my talk from where Dr. Ajay left last time, because it's a continuum, both antegrade wire escalation, antegrade dissection and re-entry and retrograde. So we need to study the lesion very well before we go further. And I hope my slides are okay. You can see my slides.
Please go ahead, sir. Perfect.
Yeah, so we come to this hybrid CTO algorithm, which we need to find out everything. As I said, at the outset, we need to have a very good study of the angiographic picture. And occasionally we have to take a CT angio also to find out how is the artery, what is the proximal cap like, what is the body of the CTO, how are the distal vessels, how are the branches arising from there, what is the angulation, is side branch arising from there or not. These are extremely important. And I would say that very rarely we should be doing a CT as an ad hoc procedure. It's a good idea to plan well and then go ahead and do a CT. It saves so much time. And ultimately, most of the people would get through to doing a procedure in CTO, but it is the scientific way or the proper way of doing a CTO which is most important. And for that, I would believe 85% of the job is done before the case is taken on table, because the study would tell you which pathway you're going to take, what wires you are going to utilize, what hardware you need to do take along. So the other thing is that every person who is doing a CTO must have a cart, CTO cart, which should include all the wires, hardware, which are microcatheters, guideliners, and most importantly, the payload procedures, that complications can occur, and we need everything to take care of perforations, hemopericardium, and all the problems which may arise. So we should be prepared for that with covered grafts and with coils, and everything should be available. So let's look at the first thing which we need to find out when we are studying. And as the last time we talked about, in most of the cases, dual injection is the preferred modality. Most people would use dual injection. I would say that as experience increases, and in some of the cases, you can do only by radial, by a single route. But for all beginners and for at least the first 200 cases, dual injection is the way to go. And in more complicated cases, dual injection would always be needed to do those procedures. And on dual injection, we see how is the proximal cap. Is it ambiguous or unambiguous, well defined? How is the distal vessel? And where we are going to ultimately band our stent. And are there any collaterals? That is where we're going to decide that if the retrograde procedure is possible or not. Is there any major side effect at the distal cap? We'll talk about why it is important. We also need to find out, is there a branch arising from the site of the CTO, angulation, calcification, all those things we need to find out. But having studied those regions, we find that if the proximal cap is very clear, you have a tapering cap of something, then you can, if it is not ambiguous gap, then you go by the antegrade route. An antegrade route, obviously, we look at the length of the lesion, which would be very clearly demonstrated on dual injection. And if there are very good collaterals retrogradely coming up. And if the lesion is less than 20 millimeter, then obviously the treatment or the method of choice would be an antegrade wire escalation. And we talked about it last time. If the lesion is more than 20 millimeters, you would probably succeed by antegrade wire escalation also, as most of the operators do. But it is more likely that you may need an antegrade dissection and re-entry. Obviously, if the lesion is less than 20 millimeter and you do not succeed by wire escalation, then you still have to go by antegrade dissection and re-entry. And obviously, if you don't succeed by antegrade either by wire escalation or re-entry, then you go to the retrograde. And some people believe that first antegrade wire escalation, then retrograde dissection, retrograde, and the third should be antegrade dissection and re-entry. But that is a debate which we can talk about in the discussion time. Wires we talked last time, Dr. Ajay mentioned very clearly. We have light wires, light ground weight wires, medium ground weights, and then we have heavy duty wires. And low ground weight wires are fighter, Fielder XT, Fielder XTA, Fielder XTR, and they are proximal. They are very good for if you know there's a loose tissue and tracking the CTO. And they are also very good for making a knuckle. We'll talk about knuckle and how we make it, and we go about it. Medium ground wires, Pilot 200 is a wonderful wire to go about, and that sometimes can cross the CTO body also with a Pilot 200 medium ground weight of the latest generation, which is most commonly used in CTO. These are the Gaia series, Gaia 2, Gaia 3, and other similar type of wires. And then we have high ground weight, which are with no polymer jacket, and that is a Confianza wire, and that has its utility. It's a penetration wire, which is focus casting for highly resistant segments. And then we have a dedicated knuckle wires. I haven't used it much, but I heard about it, Radius MG wire from the Sahi group. And then we have a collateral crossing wire for retrograde procedure with Swan, Blue, Soho wires are extremely good. And we need to know about these wires, their properties, and how we use them and where to use it and how to use them properly. What is the antegrade dissection re-entry technique? What is that exactly it means? It's a technique of utilizing the subintimal space to advance past the CTO in a controlled fashion. And it allows for predictable and reproducible re-entry into the true lumen distally. Generally, we use very specific equipment for ADR, but we will talk about it shortly. And why do we need it? We need it that many times the wire goes subintimally, and previously we used to leave it and abandon the procedure, but we can use now subintimal route to get into the distal vessel. And especially if the lesion is more than 20 millimeter in length, then we may have to go subintimally and re-enter distally. Originally, the technique which was described for subintimal by Antonio Colombo way back in 2005, which he called as a STAR technique, which is a subintimal tracking and re-entry technique. And the modification of that came later, which was limited antegrade subintimal tracking, was described in 2010. We must thank Dr. Antonio Colombo, because I think he's one of the most important interventionists who has popularized angioplasty stenting. Many of you may not know that it was Antonio Colombo's work way back in 1994-95, when we used to use a lot of oral anticoagulants and ticlopidine had just become available. And there used to be a lot of stent thrombosis, and he demonstrated that high pressure post-dilatation of the stents limits the use of, limits the stent thrombosis. And these two things came at the same time. Use of dual antiplatelets in place of anticoagulants, and secondly, high pressure balloon dilatation post stent deployment for optimum deployment of the stent. And both these changed the way we do angioplasty stenting. Results improved, and it became the treatment of choice in large majority of patients of intervention. So we can't thank Antonio Colombo enough, and subsequently also his contribution has been enormous. So he was the first one to describe the STAR technique, but we'll talk about what are the limitations of the STAR technique. And when is the antegrade dissection re-entry the treatment of choice? As I said, that please forget about the spelling mistake. When the proximal cap of CTO is ambiguous, it is not very clear where it is arising or where it is tapering or not. It's a blunt edge and you don't know where it is there. That is one area where ADR would be of use. When the CTO length is more than 20 millimeter, when the distal cap is not at an important bifurcation, this is an extremely important point. And when the distal vessel is not diffusely diseased or underfilled. and when there are no good intervention collateral present. In these cases, a retrograde is probably not possible, and you may have to use ADR technique as a treatment of choice. Many people who are very commonly use IVUS. It is a good way to use IVUS in chronic CTO also. And there are a number of ways where an IVUS can be used to get into the true lumen. One of the most important or the commonest is that you get into the side branch. And you can see here that there's a side branch. You pass an IVUS into the side branch, and you can visualize where the true lumen is, and utilizing that, you can enter the true lumen. But we'll come to IVUS in a short while again. So there are a number of methods by which we do ADR, and there are dedicated hardware for that. And some of them are a cross-boss catheter. We'll talk about it. Then we can do a knuckle wiring. Then we have a Stingray re-entry technique. And then we have a non-Stingray re-entry methods of entering the distal normal vessel. Now this cross-boss, I don't have personally much experience about it, but it's available and has been used occasionally here. It is basically designed to quickly and safely deliver a guide wire to a true lumen or subintimal space. We rotate it very fast, very rapidly, anti-clockwise or clockwise, and as fast as one can rotate. And this atraumatic distal tip, which is 0.14 guide wire compatible, that goes distally, and it's atraumatic, so we can move it distally. And this is one of the important use of antegrade dissection. Then we have a Stingray, and we'll come to Stingray in a short while. A new hardware is becoming available, which is called as a recross device. It has 2 lumens, and it's not available in India. And not much literature is available on its use, but maybe in the coming years, this will also become available. Another method to get into the subintimal space. Sometimes you may not be getting into the subintimal space with the proximal cap is very hard, calcified, and you are not even able to get into the subintimal space. So there is a technique which is called as a move the cap technique. And what it is, what we do in this thing is that you take a balloon, 1:1 balloon, ratio, on a BMW wire, and you take a microcatheter along with that on a different wire, and you inflate the balloon proximal to the CTO. And when you inflate the balloon proximal to the CTO, it produces an intimal tear. And then with the help of a microcatheter, different wire, you make a loop and can cross that. That is called moving the cap. That means you are actually, that is also called the base technique. That means you have a balloon, and you inflate the balloon proximal to the CTO. And once you inflate the balloon, this causes an intimal tear, and then the loop can enter the subintimal space. Sometimes even that may not be possible. So there is something which is called as a base power knuckle technique. In this, what you do is you take a balloon and a wire, and you take another microcatheter, you inflate the balloon proximally, and then that through the microcatheter, you can push the knuckle through the subintimal space. So base technique, balloon inflated proximally, and then subintimal entry. And then we have a side base technique. The side base technique is that if you have a side branch available, then you go into the side branch, and in the side branch, you inflate the balloon. And then because it will be blocking the side branch, with the help of a microcatheter on a different wire, you make a knuckle and cross the subintimal area. So these are the various methods where you can actually cross the subintimal by not actually going through near the CTO. You are making a new entry point, moving the cap and entering into the subintimal space. There is a new catheter which is likely to be available if it's not available already. But I thought we should have spent a minute or so on this. This is a trap liner. This gives you, this is a very good catheter. This is a balloon, it has a balloon and it has a normal guide liner as compared to the normal guide liner, which is 25 centimeters. This is 10 centimeters, shorter in length. But what it does is, this is a guide liner. Go to the guide liner. And then in the guide liner, there is you have a metal thing which takes a balloon, and this inflates the balloon. And then you have two wires. And when you're crossing the hardware, you deflate the balloon, and the hardware will go. There are two, three important things which this particular trap liner does. One thing, it gives you a very good sport to do a procedure, and so you can do the procedure without guide liner coming back. And second important thing is this is producing a no flow into the antegrade vessel. Now, when it is one of the problems which we'll be talking about shortly is that when you're doing a subintimal dissection, many times there is a hematoma formation at the site of the subintimal thing, which occludes the distal vessel. So re-entry to the normal vessel gets completely blocked. And then you have to suck it, the subintimal space, to re-inflate the distal vessel. So this particular trap liner takes care of that because it is producing no flow, you can take this guide liner actually at the site of the subintimal space. And then you put the balloon there, so there is no blood going into the subintimal space, and you can do a procedure without the risk of producing a hematoma at the site of subintimal hemorrhage. Now let's come to cross-boss catheter. When do we use cross-boss catheter? One is that if we have a in-stent restenosis, obviously we can use the cross-boss, and the stent would prevent the cross-boss from going outside the vessel, and you can go inside. In-stent restenosis can be taken care of. And that's what we talked about. Antegrade, the length is long, and there's a proximal cap is ambiguous. We can do it. Now, this is one of the very few devices in coronary intervention which is used without the help of a guide wire. Now, what we do is we take a normal guide wire, workhouse guide wire, BMW or run-through guide wire, and take it at till the site of the CTO. And over that, we pass this crossboss, and then we withdraw the wire. And then the crossboss, we have to rotate it with the top very rapidly, the antegrade or retrograde. It is important that it can actually jump. This crossboss, which has a blunt tip, can actually jump. So what we do is that we use this TUHI to see that it is only about 2 fingers or 3 finger breadth. So only this much of movement of the crossboss occurs at a given moment in time. So you have some control about the movement of this crossboss. The idea is that it uses a controlled dissection, and that is it will rotate for a short period of time, and then suddenly it will jump, and it can go into any of the 4 sites which we'll be talking about. But it is important that we keep it only 2-3 fingers out, and we rotate it as rapidly as possible so that we have some control over where it is going. Now, it can go into one best way is that it can actually cross the CTO, which would happen rarely, but it was seen in large trials that about 17 to 25% patients of CTO, this can actually cross distally. So that is the best way. So you exchange with the wire, do a balloon angioplasty, and proceed further. But more often, what it would happen is that it may go into outside the vessel architecture, and that is one of the ways that it may go into side branch. And if it goes into side branch, then it obviously will not be in the line of your vessel. And third thing is, which we normally it is meant to do, is it will go into subintimal space distal to the CTO. So we'll see how each one of these is handled. And another way is that actually doesn't cross the CTO, but stays in between. One important thing is that because inadvertently, some contrast can go into it once it has gone to distal vessel, it can increase the dissected segment significantly. So it is important that to prevent this inadvertent contrast injection, you remove the syringe from the port, and that is important. You block it so that even inadvertently, no contrast goes in when the crossbars are gone to some distal. So that's important. So let's see that it is unable to cross the CTO. That is that it may be hard, may not be able to cross it. So you need to increase the guide catheter support, and that guide catheter support can be increased either with a better guide catheter, or you can take a guide liner and then use this crossbars again the rotation of the cross pass again. Or you can puncture this with a hard wire, Finza wire, or maybe Conquest Pro wire. And then once you have punctured it, then again you use the cross bar to cross it. So that is one way that if it is not on making any change. The other thing is which can happen is that it may go into a side branch. And when it goes into a side branch, then you obviously need to withdraw it. And you can see it in multiple views to see that it is not in the main vessel, it is in the branch, out of phase with the main vessel. And you bring it back, use a guide wire, and you can bring it back and then use either a knuckle wire or the stiffer wire to cross, and then use the cross bars again. The third thing which can happen is that it may go into the body of the CTO. And when it goes in the body of the CTO, again the same thing you need to do. Either you make a knuckle wire redirection into the two lumen display, or you escalate the guide wire, take a stiffer guide wire, and then cross it. So this is what can happen. And as I said, that in some patients, it may actually happen that your cross bars may cross the CTO and go into the distal two lumen. That is the best option which you can have, but it happens not more than 1/4 to 1/3 of these cases. But you need to confirm this position in different views to be clear that it is actually in the two lumen. The most important is that it goes into the subintimal space, and that is what it is meant for. And then we'll talk about how to get into from subintimal space. This is a controlled dissection. You are just distal to the distal end of the CTO, and then you have to re-enter, and we will come about what are the methods of making a re-entry to these vessels. Now, another method is that these are the dedicated dissection and re-entry methods, but we have been using knuckle wire for some time. And this knuckle wire, how do we use it? Is that you take a microcatheter and then you can form a knuckle, or you can form a knuckle outside. And to study the proximal cap, you can do multiple views in angiography. CT angiography is extremely useful. As I said, that IVUS will tell you sometime where the two lumen is, and moving the cap we talked about, which is scratch and go based technique, and the Carolino technique. We'll talk about a Carolino technique also for a moment. And sometime you can use a retrograde wire, and the retrograde wire can act as a marker, or you can do, sometimes you may have to do a retrograde crossing also. So knuckle wire is important. And knuckling, we have different, we need a microcatheter. Corsair is very good. Turnpike is, there are other microcatheters which can also be used. And guide wires which are used to make a knuckle commonly are Fielder XT and Fighter. Fielder XT makes a very good knuckle. And Pilot 200 has also been used to make a knuckle. It makes a little less of this curve, more of a U curve with Pilot 200, but that has been used. But we need to use a polymer jacketed guide wire to make these knuckles. So you can make a knuckle outside and then pass into the crosshair, and that would be help. Or sometime, as we were talking previously, that you can take a normal your workhouse guide wire, pass a microcatheter, and take out the wire out and pass this Fielder XT and push it, and it will form a knuckle there inside the vessel. So this is a Pilot wire. We talked about it last time. I think most of you know about this Pilot, and it's really good for mediumly hardened CTOs, but it's also used to form a knuckle to get into distal. We will talk about another use of Pilot, which is very important, Pilot 200. So when we're making a knuckle, obviously this is not the way to give a curve to the wire, but this is how we have to make a knuckle. This is Fielder XT knuckle. Pilot knuckle will be smaller and it will U-shaped wire. Now, how do we advance a knuckle? When we push the knuckle, and again, any of the four things can happen. The knuckle may go into the side branch. The knuckle may go into the subintimal space, which we want it to go into. And it may go into the side branch and all the way distal to its branch, which was the original star technique described by Colombo. And how do we tackle each one of these situations? come to that, if it goes to side branch, then we need to redirect it and change the wire into stiffer wire and then try to cross it. That is one way. The other thing is that it is going to subintegral place. What we do is we change the wire, we put in a microcapacitor down, we change the wire into stiffer wire, we can use a miracle wire there, and we can increase the guide catheter support, which we talked about, and then we can try to exchange it with a method to get into the re-entry if we cross it. So once we have crossed the subintegral space distal to the CTO, then we need to re-enter into the vessel again. And the re-entry methods are, one is that we can use, take a microcatheter here and take a stiffer guide wire, make an angle into it, and with the help of a retrograde injection, we can see where the two entries, and with a confianza wire or a conquest pro wire, we can Hornets wire, we can enter into the true lumen with the help of a microcatheter. Then, wire going into the subintegral space and the wire being redirected into the true lumen space. And we can also use a parallel wire, leave the wire here and leave another wire and use it if it can cross into the distal vessel. And the other one is retrograde, talk some other time. Now, when we have reached the subintegral space distal to off to the CTO, now we have to enter into the true lumen. And if it is very close, the idea is that we are as close to the CTO distal end as possible. Because if the wire goes extremely distally and enters into the side branch, the Colombo technique, the problem is that if you do angioplasty stenting in them, one is that this branch would be lost. And more importantly, it's been seen that subsequently restenosis, reinterventions are extremely high. So this technique has been almost given up. So we don't use this technique anymore unless we are trying to do a bailout procedure or unless we're trying to do an invest technique, which we talk about what invest technique means like. So all efforts are that after going into the subintegral space, we enter into the true lumen just distal to the CTO. Earlier this place to the distal end of the CTO, better it is, because then the results are as good as in normal CTO wire escalation technique. So that is important that we don't use too much of a subintegral space for re-entry. Now, sometime, despite your best efforts, what happens is the wire of your cross bars goes much distally and you enter to side branch. Now, inadvertently, a star technique has happened. Now, in such cases, what do you do? And previously, people used to stent it, but now most people, what they would do is just do a balloon angioplasty and leave it at that, and come back 4 to 6 weeks or 2 months later, and when you will find that the re-entry would be very good, and you can actually reconstruct the vessel with a very good result. So this is what we call as the invest technique. So star inadvertent, do a invest to come back on a later date. Now re-entry, one is Stingray, which is important, which is a way to go, and the other are guide wire based, which we talked about, star technique and the Carolino technique, which are just coming to the short wire. Now this is a Stingray is a very important balloon, but this is designed to target and re-enter the true lumen from a subintegral position. It's a flat balloon. It is self-orienting, and it has two outlets, 2 ports, which are situated 180 degrees to each other. And then it has a Stingray wire. The Stingray wire is stiffer wire, and the original Stingray wire had a tip which would catch the intima and to make an entry. So what it does is we need to see that this is a self-orienting balloon. So you will have one face of this thing facing the lumen of the vessel and the other facing the intima. And that is important to know. Now, it is important how do we prepare this Stingray balloon. We take a 20 cc dry syringe and suck it as much as we can so that it is completely dry, and then we inject 100% contrast. And we inject a little contrast with the idea that we can see this balloon very clearly, because the orientation of this balloon is extremely important. And we have reached the subintegral space. with the help of a cross boss or a knuckle wire, and then we pass a microcatheter, and we take a miracle wire and keep it in the subintimal space, and over the miracle wire, then we pass a stingray balloon. And sometimes the stingray may not cross. You may have to use a smaller balloon to do a little dilatation in the subintimal space and increase the guide catheter pores. And even if that doesn't cross, then you may have to use a new stingray balloon. So we have reached to the subintimal space, and then we need to orientate this stingray balloon. Now, as I said, the stingray balloon is a self-orienting balloon, and if it is on the, if we look on the sideways, it will look like this linear line with two poles, and this is what we are trying to look at. And because this is how it will be looking like. This is the lumen of the vessel. This is the adventitia, and we're looking like a linear line. So we know at one end there's a lumen, the other end is adventitia. And this is, we don't want this to be looking like that. Because if it is looking end face, then it will be looking like parallel lines. And we have the markers in the center. So what we do is, after the stingray has self-oriented itself, then we take multiple, rate the fluoroscopy equipment to take multiple views to see where that it is looking like this. And we need to do the sting once it is looking like this and not looking like this. So it's important that fluoroscopically we get that particular view in which the stingray is looking like a linear line. So once we orientate it like this, then we take a stingray wire and do a small puncture. And in the initial stages, the same wire was used to enter the true lumen. You have entered the true lumen, and the same wire was used to enter the distal true lumen. But what would happen is that many times this area is also diseased. So you enter into the stingray wire, and the stingray wire goes into the other side and enters into a subintimal space, produces a problem. So what now people do is, this particular thing can be, even we can use a Gaia wire for use, or a Hornets wire, or a stiffer wire like Confluenza wire. Now what now is done, the procedure is done is that this is what we was talking about, that you have entered into the true lumen, but still there is a atheromatous plaque here. So you, if you advance the wire, this is going to get into this atheromatous plaque and may not enter the true lumen. So what you do is that after you have made an entry with a stingray, you change, this is what we call as a sting and swap. This is what we call as a sting and swap. But what we know these days done is sting and exchange. You get a sting wire into the lumen, and then you change the wire to a little lesser stiffer wire like a Pilot 200. So Pilot 200 is extremely useful for entry into the true lumen, and then you can complete your procedure by true lumen. So now another technique has come, which is called the double blind stick and swap technique. You use two wires to enter the, and whichever enters the true lumen, that is used as the wire to go. This is Pilot 2, which is being used. This stingray you can see, and the Pilot wire can be used after the sting has been done. Now, this is what we call as a Corlino technique, and this is very rarely used. That you enter the subintimal space and you inject 0.5 to 1 ml of contrast in the sub, which will be giving you a linear spread. And this would give you another stiffer wire like a Conquest Pro or a Confluenza wire can be used to re-enter. But the problem with this Corlino technique is that however hard you may try, you may extend this subintimal space significantly, and there may be problems. So none of the people use this Corlino technique anywhere. So microcatheter induced injection of contrast is avoided at all cost. Now, IVUS is extremely useful if you want to see the true lumen, and it can be in the side branch, or you can see where the side branch is arising from as compared to the true lumen, and then you can use that to both angiographic and IVUS picture. You can use an IVUS to enter the true lumen. This is a picture, the study which has seen that as the JCTO score increase, the chances of antegrade dissection, re-entry, and retrograde increased. As JCTO score was 0 to 1, most of the cases could be done antegrade, but as it increased to 3, 4, and 5, more cases were done by antegrade dissection, re-entry, or by a retrograde injection. So let's talk about a patient. This is a 60-year-old male. He came to us with anterior wall myocardial infarction, cardiogenic shock. We did an angiography which showed LAD proximal 100% occlusion. RCA was proximally CTO. We did a PCI of the LAD as an elective procedure, and we planned RCA angioplasty later on. He had a very stormy course in the hospital. He was on a ventilator for 30 days. He was on IVP for a long period of time, required high doses of inotropes, and he had multiple recurrent VT storms. So after coming out of ventilator and IVP, we gave him a 12-chamber ICD also because of his arrhythmias and intermittent blocks and VT shock. And then we brought him back. We had done a primary angioplasty of LAD. We brought him back for angioplasty stenting of the right coronary CTO. I would like you to have a close look at this right corner. And if you see this vessel, there is a severe stenosis proximally, and there is a metatic segment, and a diffuse disease, and there is a long segment CTO. And I thought that we should be able to get through this CTO very easily. And we went with a microcatheter and first with a feeder wire, dual injection. I thought we had crossed the lumen, and then we went distally. And with the help of microcatheter, we were able to get into the where I thought we were in the two lumen. It took a little time, but with the Gaia wire. So the first a parallel wire did not succeed. Then we went with the Gaia wire, and we were able to cross into the distal lumen. So I thought we had gone to the side branch, and probably we should go ahead and do the angioplasty. Couldn't cross it with the microcatheter. Then we took a small balloon, 1.5 millimeter, and then we did a change the wire and passed a BMW wire, which I thought was in the true lumen, with a balloon angioplasty, and we had an extensively dissected artery. And I was not very happy about the PDA branch here. So I thought maybe there's a lot of dissection and maybe I have the subintimal space. So let me try from the retrograde. There was some staining of the contrast also. So I was not very clear that why there is such extensive dissection. I thought maybe I've created a lot of false lumen all along. So I went through the retrograde technique with the help of microcatheter, and again, the staining you can see. The wire could not negotiate. Idea was to do a reverse cut, but it was not successful. Procedure had gone on for a long period of time. Patient was hemodynamically stable. So I thought I will leave it at that and come back in a few weeks' time to see what happens. And this is, you see the date of this. This was in January 2020. And then we came back in November 2020. And this is what we saw. The right coronary has heat, and there's a stenosis, and it was very easy to get into this vessel. So this is what we call as a invest technique. I didn't know about this invest technique at that time, but it gave a very good healing of the vessel. And this patient is doing extremely well after angioplasty stenting of the mid portion. Had a very good result on this thing. So this is the final result which we got. So sometime, dissection can heal over a period of time. Another patient, 70-year-old male, and this is what we have, CTO of the proximal RCA. And this is what we see a lot of collaterals. We have two collaterals. This segment is not very long, but what we see in this particular thing is that there's a branch arising from the CTO site, and exactly at that site, you can see a side branch arising. There is an ambiguous gap proximally. We thought that let's go ahead and do another angioplasty stenting with the help of microcatheter with a 1.5 millimeter balloon. Subsequently, we were able to this procedure and then go ahead and fill the disease vessel, multiple stents. This is what we finally got. So study of the angiographic picture is extremely important in such cases to plan the course of action. This is the final result. This 61-year-old male, he had multiple PCI in the past, and he came with class 3 angina on maximal medication. He was severely limited, and more importantly, his quality of life was very affected, and he wanted procedure to be done. So this is the LAD, which is nice, and this is the right coronary. And he had multiple stents, 2 layers of stents, about 4 stents, right from proximal to distal. CTO, again, a branch arising from the edge of the CTO, the proximal cap of the CTO, some go into the vessel, but distally completely occluded with retrograde form. So this is how we went ahead. We crossed it with the help of the microcatheter and the dia wire, and were able to cross that lesion. Could not negotiate any balloon through that, so we had to use a guide liner. You can see the tip of the guide liner right at the side of the proximal end of the stent, and then with the help of 1.5 balloon, I had to use the same wire to use a 1.5 balloon before exchanging it. And then we exchange it. We exchange the wire and high pressure dilatation 3.5 millimeter, the deployment of 3 stents. This is what we got. So final result, he's doing well. So now this is what I had put on the WhatsApp few days back. So I thought I should talk about it for a minute or so. This is a anomalous right corner, CTO and a branch arising from that, and AL catheter. We put in a wire to cross it. You can see the anchoring wire, the guide liner, and then crossing with the microcatheter assisted via crossing. Then we change the wire and with multiple stents. Post-stent, post-dilatation. And see what we got finally. So anyway, these are a few of the examples. But what I would say is, what are the challenges to overcome? And wire is suboptimal, or you electively go into antegrade dissection. You can have a problem with the crossbars, which we talked about, and crossbars get stuck, goes into a side branch. You have a failure to re-entry with the side wire, with a stingray wire. This is an important point, that sometimes you have a stingray which cannot get into the distal vessel because of a hematoma formation. The treatment for that is that you take another wire into the subintimal space, put in over the wire, small balloon, and withdraw the wire and use the distal tip of that over the wire balloon to suck the hematoma from the subintimal space to recanalize the distal vessel, and again use the stingray. And as I said, trap liner probably would be becoming available. And trap liner gives you an entirely bloodless feed. With a balloon, it is preventing the blood from going distally. You can take this trap liner, which is very soft tip, exactly smaller than the normal guide liner, so 10 centimeters. So in the proximal vessel or the mid-segment vessel, you can take this trap liners just into a subintimal space and in a bloodless space do the procedure. So that is one problem which you need to talk about. Hematoma formation, you need to not have too extensive a dissection, because the more the dissection in the subintimal space, more hematoma is going to form. So systemic step-by-step approach important for integrate this sectional re-entry. Stingray is the main re-entry technique. Stick and swab, we talked about. Double-blind stick and swab, straw useful for facilitating re-entry. We should be prepared for complication, which could be your collaterals may be knocked off. You may produce a perforation. As we talked about, you may produce a hematoma in the subintimal space. So CTO troubleshooting management is as important as taking care of the procedure itself. At the end, I would say, as Shahi had mentioned, that CTO we should be only doing when there is a strong indication for relief to the patient. There should be symptoms of angina which are not explained by any other region, and there should be every effort should be made to demonstrate objective evidence of ischemia. The problem arises is when those patients who are post-bypass have lima occluded, have lima working and all the venous nerves occluded, severe left ventricle dysfunction, and they have angina. So those are the patients where, doing CTO is extremely important. But objective evidence should be tried as much as possible. This is an interesting technique, integrated sectional re-entry, and then we can have some discussion now. Thank you. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, sir. Ajay Swami sir, you can take over. There are so far no questions from audience. I think questions will be coming up now.
Yes, I hope people take the benefit of having sir on one-on-one.
I think everyone must have been mesmerized by the presentation, so no one wanted to pick up a question. But
yeah, I really enjoyed your presentation, sir. Just one or two, clarifications. The dissection and re-entry, the cross-pause and Stingray combination is quite expensive. So many of us resort to using the knuckle wire, and to get the knuckle down beyond the CTO segment is sometimes not so easy. I mean, it gets knuckled in the proximal part of the CTO body. It's very difficult to get it beyond, and even if you do manage, it's a little difficult to get the microcatheter to follow the knuckle till the place where you can actually stick back into the or do a re-entry into the true lumen using a whatever wire one wants to use. So sometimes what we do is we use small 1.5 millimeter balloons over these knuckles to try and create, as long as you're within the vessel architecture, there's not much danger. The thing is not to exceed the vessel arc. If you don't exit the vessel architecture, you use a small 1.5 millimeter balloon up to the tip of the up to the shoulder of the knuckle, create a space, and then put in your microcatheter up to there, and then advance the knuckle a little bit more, and then try and use a harder wire to re-enter in the two views. So I was just wondering what
I think
would have to say.
Absolutely right that you can use a small balloon to see that your microcatheter enters into the distal vessel. And the Pilot 200 knuckle may be also useful in such cases where the Fitter HT knuckle is softer, but Pilot 200 may be more stiffer. And then you can re-enter. And we used to use Conquest sometimes, and Conquest Pro to re-enter. But you have to give a shape to the distal vessel, the distal tip of the wire to re-enter. Obviously, yes. But I think Stingray and would be becoming more popular now. I intend to be using it more often in the coming few weeks, and we should have more experience with that. It's costly, but the cost is offset by the time you would be saving. The radiation exposure and the contrast which you use, that part would be taken care of, and your failure rates would decrease. Most of the operators now have about 85% plus success rate anyway. But if you are planning a more complex cases, then that would be the way to go about it. Sure, we can make a knuckle and a small.
And last thing, the same thing I forgot to say, I had written it down, but I missed it out, is a dual lumen microcatheter. So what we do is we balloon it up to the shoulder and take the microcatheter up to there, leave the knuckled wire where it is, and use a harder wire to re-enter with the dual. Earlier, we used to use a single microcatheter, pull out the knuckle and then do it. But the dual lumen actually sometimes gets you out of trouble here. Again, the important thing is that we don't exit the vessel architecture. So you stay subintimally and don't go beyond the muscular layer, then the fear of perforation is practically non-existent if one is careful. Only the bends and the places where the vessel, sometimes you can't see what course it is taking from, point A to point B. The whole thing is not really seen. You can just see it reforming distally. One is occasionally pleasantly surprised, but sometimes these bends and tortuosities actually create a lot of trouble because you're not within the architecture. You inflate a balloon and then there's a problem. So you must be ready to sort those things out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think one should be taking multiple views, not work only in one or two views. And even if you have a smallest of doubt, you should take multiple views to be doubly sure about that you are in the architecture. The problem with wire is less common. Wire-induced perforation in a CTO would produce less problem. Problem is if your microcatheter has you have paused a microcatheter over top of it, or you've done a little balloon, then there will be a problem. Sometimes your retrograde flow can keep on seeping, and unfortunately, in patients who have CTOs, this can occur. The problem can occur over a period of hours. It may not be immediate, as happens if there's a large vessel perforation. You may have a small seepage and it may occur in the middle of the night, and when you may have to rush back or it may not be detected. So you have, I normally recommend my people to do every 2 hours echocardiography to see that it can happen even 24 hours later. And the other point is in post-CABG patient. Normally we believe that these patients, because of pericardium being cut or removed, they do not have problems of hematoma formation. But that may not be true in some patients. Maybe localized hematoma formation, and it may be at sites which may compress the left atrium or the right atrium, and that may not be easily be evacuated. You may have to use a CT guidance to evacuate it. First, diagnosis is tough, and then you have to evacuate this. If you have hypertension subsequently, and there is no other reason, please get a CT done, and CT may show a large hematoma. You may have to drain it by CT guidance. So we should not be under the illusion that post-bypass patients do not get tamponade. Localized tamponade can be catastrophic in some patients.
And the other thing about the Gladius wire, and I used it for the first time about 2-3 weeks ago, and it's a very nice wire, and it actually kind of tracks on its own. And not only for a knuckle, it's very nice where one doesn't know exactly where to go. And I feel the tactile feel is probably the best amongst even the Gaia. If you actually use the Gaia, there's not so much tactile feel. It's just that the wire design is so beautiful that it doesn't exit. Gladius is a little different there. It actually kind of gives a little bit of feedback. So
I'll get hold of that.
Yes, so that's very nice. I mean, I used it in another patient in whom the proximal cap was not very clearly seen. And I was pleasantly surprised that maybe I was imagining it. I don't know. We'll have to use it more and see. And what else did I write down?
Where are Dr. Neeraj and Dr. Surya Prakash?
Dr. Neeraj needs some punishment must be prescribed by Dr. Bali for him. He has, betrayed us 3 times. This is not fair.
He has promised after Diwali he will be making a presentation. So we should all come here, sit for silence till he comes and makes a presentation.
So punishment is for him, not for us. If you are there, you cannot be silent. You have to tell us something.
But I was a little reluctant for this talk because personally, I like wire escalation. I think 80%, 85% of my cases are antegrade wire escalation, and the rest maybe retrograde. But wire antegrade dissection is, I'm a gentle operator. I don't like, pushing it.
Sir, this
peripheral arteries also, this knuckle works very well.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So, and in the peripheral, you can actually balloon it also in the subintimal space, and you can break the intima and establish a flow. So those things can be done here also, as we talk about base technique. But then, I would say that this should be a third choice rather than the second choice. You have antegrade, you have a retrograde, and then you should have antegrade wire escalation, this thing, dissection, re-entry. But that's okay. But CTO are becoming the more important subsets. Indications must be extremely well defined, endpoints will be very well defined. It is also important that we put somebody on charge to say how much radiation exposure has occurred, how much contrast has been given to the patient, how much time has elapsed, and it's always a good idea to stop at some stage. If you feel that you are not making a headway, you can always come back with a different strategy. But once we are injecting the contrast, I call it poison. You're injecting the more the contrast, more poisonous to the patient, and radiation is suicide. So you have to avoid both of these, radiation and contrast. These are the two things which should be, are the big enemies of interventionist and patient.
So does the presence of a calcified plaque tells us that it may deflect towards away from the lumen? Are there more chances if the plaque is calcified? Because sometimes I have that fear that if a calcified plaque is present, then it may deflect the wire away from the lumen and we may perforate.
Yeah, no, this calcification would depend on how much is the calcification, because is it a concentric calcification, it is 90-degree calcification, 180-degree calcification, but it's more likely that it will go into the space where it is not calcified. So that is
chances.
So that is why in some such cases they say that you move the cap. You try to enter below the CTO, even proximal to the site where you're actually seeing the site. But it's also important that you take multiple views to define the cap, to be sure about, sometime in one view it may look like ambiguous cap, but you might take multiple views and you might find some sufficient. No questions? Great.
I think
We can talk cricket.
Dr. Meeraji now has just joined. I don't know whether he has a question or.
Say my hello to Meeraji. Meeraji was my senior resident.
Thanks, boss. Even both, we had another CSI meeting, so where I was participating. That's why I could join you all late.
I will tell you a small story about Meeraji.
No, mera izzat na khol le.
No. This is a pleasant story. This is about myself, in fact. The first day I was posted in Dr. Wahi's OPD, and it needs to go till very late. And Meeraji was a senior person there, and I did not get any case. It was 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., and no case was allotted to me. So I told Meeraji, Meeraji, I don't think Dr. Wahi knows that I exist in this world, so I'm going home. So if any case comes, you take care of it. So at 5:30, he allotted a case to me, which Meeraji had to take care of. And next day, I got, what was his name? Dr. Wahi's man Friday. What was his name, Meeraji?
Even suddenly I can't.
GDA which he had. Karam Singh?
I know. He's always carrying that suitcase, fellow.
Yes, suitcase. So he came and told, yesterday Dr. Wahi was looking and you were absent from the OPD. So then I realized that the case can come at any time. So,
Anyway.
I completely agree with the ADR comment. Even we don't use ADR much, except in retrograde. If we have to move the cap, that's the only time we use the ADR. We would much rather do an investment procedure if one manages to cross. And I think Dr. Werner also, he's not really fond of ADR much. Gerard Werner, the European CTO expert. And
but I think this dedicated Stingray and cross-boss coming probably would make it a little more, because you have a controlled section. With a knuckle wire, however hard you try, unless your retrograde collaterals are coming and you know what is the distal end of the CTO, there is an issue. How far you go with the knuckle. That's important that, you have to be very clear about the distal end.
Yes, sir. So the problem with the ADR and the LAD is that you end up, kind of completely knocking off all the diagonals and the septals. And you have to really think very hard whether it is worth it. And so most of the time you end up using an ADR only in the RCA, in the mid to distal RCA segment, because you can't be too close to the PDPLB. So that is why most of the ADRs are done in the RCA or even in the circumflex, a non-dominant circumflex or a large OM or something. But most of the time, ADR kind of, what the point what sir made about the knuckle wire. Essentially, the difference between the cross-pose stingray and the knuckle wire is the ability of the cross-pose to reach the distal part of the CTO, where you can see the collateralization is slightly better than with a knuckle wire, even with the balloon and with the knuckle and whatever. And but it is still so expensive that it's very difficult to justify the use for a.
It is important
RCA
that
segment.
I mentioned that you have to see that from the 2B Bosch, you are only 2 fingers or something like that. So you exactly know that how much is your cost was moving.
How much?
So that way you are under control the section. This or you're gone. It's a blunt thing. It's a blunter section, so it is not going to expand. But the important thing is that this hematoma which forms in the subintimal space, that is a huge problem, and that can happen even. This hematoma sometimes in angiography we don't realize that how important it is. That even if suppose there is a dissection and there is a one perforation, and we keep on waiting with a balloon inflation for a long period of time, and there may come a stage where the hematoma is so big that it is compressing the vessel, and even if you put in a stent graft at that time, it may not fully expand. So the idea is that you prevent this hematoma formation, or even if this hematoma is, the section has been produced, your reaction should be so fast that you act before this hematoma actually occludes the distal vessel. So if it has occluded the distal vessel, you are never going to get into the true lumen. That can be a problem. So hematoma, then we keep on sucking and taking care of it. But this, I think, trap liner is a wonderful and way of producing a bloodless thing. That is something which would be. The hardware is becoming extremely making the job much easier.
Yes, that is true. More and more.
But I think timing is important. Most of us forget about once you are into CTO, maybe 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 hours. That's a problem. So we need to make a quick job of it. And that is probably done best if you have a CT angio, or if you studied the lesion very well, and if you have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C and a plan E, get out of it.
Yeah. No, the investment procedure is actually quite an extremely good way to get out of trouble. Now that they've given it a formal name, we can use it more frequently. But the investment procedure, that means you balloon it and don't really stent it at that time, and it's very often it does the job very well, as Dr. Bali showed so elegantly. But it's happened to all of us, and sometimes you must decide not to put a stent. It's all right to balloon it and leave a little bit of dissection and come back, and when it heals, it's not so bad when you look at it the next time. So
it's just like a spontaneous coronary dissection. It's an acquired and dissection to heal. Some dissection to heal. But obviously, if the patient is symptomatic, then you have no option. Then as a bailout, you have to take care of that.
A general question or a comment, Bali Saab. We always worry about doing these CT angios, worrying about hardware and trying to limit our time and all. But are we forgetting the quality of X-ray machines we use? What's your feeling about people upgrading their cath labs to the latest ones where the radiation dose is less? No one talks about that because it involves a lot of investment. What is your take on that?
No, I think 2 things. One is that what I have seen in my younger colleagues doing, that many of them do a lot of cine. We have to understand fluoroscopic exposure and cine exposure, the amount of radiation is extremely high. So avoid as many cine as possible. Cine should only be done which you are trying to document something to be shown to anybody, your peers or anybody else later on. Cine is not for your own utilization there. So one is limit the number of cine. The second thing is somebody should be keeping a watch on how much radiation is being done. And radiation protection, we have a number of methods to take care of radiation protection. And definitely, if we can invest in a low radiation equipment, nothing like that, but then that is investment for the operator. And unfortunately, the corporate, the business houses, and even the doctors who have become entrepreneurs do not feel investing in the health of doctors is such a great investment because it doesn't give them any return on investment. But I think that is one area where there's a problem. You may not get radiation-induced malignancy or something like that, but radiation-induced fatigue, radiation-induced dermatitis, radiation-induced blood, hair loss, and there's multiple thyroid problem and your cataract and multiple areas which can get by radiation. That's what I'm saying. Radiation is suicide, contrast is abetting a suicide of the patient. So that is two areas which we need to work on every time. I think every few months there must be a departmental discussion on radiation, contrast, and quality control.
Great.
It is extremely important. And CTO, we should use headgear, we should use all protection, and we should also, even, PGI, we had a problem, the lead aprons are not effective. I remember in fluoroscopy on a Thursday, Dr. Miraji will remember, we would go to do a fluoroscopy of a mitral valve in the radiology department, and there was two cones, two lead cones, one for Madam Mrs. Kataria and one for Dr. Wahi. And the 8 of us would be standing behind Dr. Wahi to see as if the radiation is going straight away and not penetrating into the rest of the people. So that is the unfortunate part, the gowns which are available, the number of gowns, somebody can wear it, others cannot wear it. That this is something which is extremely painful to at least everybody. So we should take care of our youngsters, we should take our colleagues, our nurses, our technicians, and see to it that radiation protection of quality is a given. Nobody has to ask for it, and we should limit it. That is something which I am very particular about it. Now, many of us, because of heavy lead apron, have cervical spondylitis or something like that, shoulder problems, and drooping shoulders and things like that. So these are areas where corporates must think this is investment which is important. This must be made. And your point is extremely well taken. That if there is equipment which is low radiation exposure, and one should definitely invest in it. That cost is nothing is more important than life.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
doctors live less, longer life than the normal non-doctors. That data is available. Many times in the care of our patient, we do tend to forget about your own health. That can be done. So if I happen to make a hospital, I will invest in a low radiation equipment, but that it's important. And the same thing is contrast also. I've seen so many people. Yesterday I was talking to one of my colleagues. You keep on injecting contrast, taking multiple views, and you have to limit it. There should be a control of the amount of contrast which you use. 200 ml, 300 ml, so ongoing. There's some problem. So things are changing. Now the equipment is much better, but you also have to limit the exposure. So that is where Stingray investment would be ended.
Right.
Instead of 6 balloons, 8 balloons, which are rupturing in the body of the CPO, if you invest that into the Stingray, it probably may not be that cost. And if you use more often, probably the cost would also come.
Maybe. I don't know.
It's a monopoly product at this moment.
Yes, sir. Great point, Saul. So good idea to, in our lab, we don't do any ad hoc CTOs. All CTOs are done which are planned, number one. We always have procedure limits in the beginning. So you establish the dye limit, the radiation limit, the time limit, and what is the end point of the procedure before start. And lastly, 90% of CTOs are done on 7.5 frames per second fluoro. So except some particular patients in whom the CTO segment is short or we are not sure, except for the duration when we want to cross, you can always come back to 7.5 frames at the end. It's just very, very important to be conscious of these things during the procedure itself. If you establish the limits and plan the hardware, it's always easier to do them. I mean, chances of success are a little more. That is what I feel. But I think we had a great session. I don't know how come the chat box is empty.
Probably the audience link and speaker links are different. So there's
Right.
an intermediary who would look for the questions. Maybe people are not comfortable in putting questions there. That must be the reason. Because this is a new platform they have given us. Previously,
It took me 10 years to speak to Dr. Bali one-to-one, so I can understand the reluctance.
Really? That was not that scary.
Here is someone from the hospital.
Samit, what is your experience with the laser?
So laser, I am finding it very useful, sir. Only issues are probably it is not very trackable. So it needs a straightforward artery with not much twist and turns. But otherwise, it does wonderful job. So I've done around 7-8 cases till now, and it is with the same 2 catheters that we have been supplied. So it is still those catheters are still working well. And if it is not too much of calcium, if it is too much of calcium, again it does not help you. Then either you need
Moderate calcium.
so a modest calcium, it is very helpful. If you are thinking of, you should get it.
Great. So next we are going to have a talk by Dr. Surya Prakash on retrograde.
Yes, yes. And then
I think we
last,
should have 5-10 minutes on points which were very validly raised by Dr. Shah. I wish he was here. There are some very important factors which we should be addressing, and the caution which is asked for. We should have very good, strong indications for doing any procedure, not only to CTO, but any procedure. Doing an intervention, that you can do an intervention, you can succeed, is a given. I think most of the operators these days are good enough to do any type of procedure. But when to do, how to do, when to stop, when not to do, are also questions which should be equally importantly and strongly asked in every case. You have to justify the procedure, you have to justify the outcome, and you have to say that, wow, how it was done. So those points also, we can have a discussion someday on these areas also. How has our indication for non-invasive investigation after an MI? Previously it was 4 weeks, then it came to pre-discharge, and then it ultimately went off. Now all MIs have a indication for angiography. How things have evolved over a period of time, what justification for those evolution. So those points also are equally important. Why do we do this? There may be answers to that, but that answer must be available in each and every case. We should be not, nothing is given. So why a particular procedure is given? Things are evolving that you may do a late primary angioplasty also, we should know it. What the guidelines are saying, what is the basis for those guidelines, what articles have come, what histories of data is available. So that information must always be come. There's nothing like, given that something is being done all over, so that is why I'm doing it. We have to we must keep ourselves, equally up to date with the available information, knowledge, guidelines, and the basis for those guidelines. That is extremely important. Intervention doesn't begin and start with a guide wire or a guide catheter. It begins with a perception and knowledge, and it ends by, again, very good endpoints. Ajay, what are your thoughts?
Completely agree, sir. I tried to address this in the first 5 minutes of my CTO talk. I summarized the evidence and the registry-based data and said that we need to have symptoms, viability, reversibility before trying to attempt a CTO. And I also summarized all the data and showed that there's actually, in randomized controlled trial, there's no mortality benefit. The LV function benefit is also borderline. So the benefit is basically in patients who have got symptoms and in patients who have got reversibility. And obviously viability is a given. Only when these three questions are answered does the CTO algorithm actually begin to work. The patient is at the center of all decisions that we make. And the sad thing is that it is said that not more than 45%, probably cardiology is the discipline that has taught the rest of medicine about evidence-based medicine. Even in clinical cardiology, not more than 45 to 60% of decisions are based on evidence. 40% are still based on consensus, local opinion, local practices. And that is something that we need to continue to upgrade ourselves on. Every therapeutic decision in a patient, in our minds, we need to be clear. We are doing this because of the evidence available. We are doing this because it is recommended by an expert, or we are doing this because, I feel this is the best. As long as we are honest with ourselves and we are, clear about the basis of the decision, I think that's the best that we can do. This is an evolving science. It's going to keep on getting better as we go along. Unfortunately, if you stay in one place, the world will pass you by. So you have to keep moving with the evidence, and it is true for all of us. It is a lesson we relearn through our lives. And unfortunately, I feel that in the last decade or so, more than the last decade and a half, the kind of evidence that is being published needs to really be looked at with a microscope, because it goes absolutely contrary to what we have seen in clinical practice. And probably that is what is being reflected in the kind of discussions which are more emotionally based rather than evidence based in multiple social media groups. Discussion is always good, but we need to be hard, cold, unemotional. Look at the facts, the evidence, and registries, and our own experience, and then come to a conclusion. As long as we don't allow our own bias, I was talking too long, our own bias to get into the decision, I think that's the important thing. We know the basis for the decision that we make.
Yes, you need to.
2 points. I think one is about mortality. Mortality is a very strong indicator, very hard endpoint, but I think we have to move beyond mortality. If we look at mortality only as the endpoint, then the entire electrophysiology specialty must be given up. I don't think 90% of the AVN arteries, which are, or 90% of the EP, or any mortality benefit has ever been demonstrated. Right?
No, sir. Even for CTO, if one looks at acute MIs, if you look at MIs, patients who have got CTOs which are unaddressed and who have comorbid MIs, and patients who do not have CTOs and have MIs, there is a mortality difference between them. So there is some evidence coming from there to say that there is a benefit if these CTOs are revascularized in the long term. What I'm saying is that if you just look at the evidence overall, it's not just one thing that you look at. In an individual patient, you must know this is the reason why we are doing it. That is what I was trying to say. Mortality as such is absolutely true.
Why I talked about mortality is because this is talked about many times.
Yes.
There is no mortality.
Absolutely.
So that is only one of the
90% of medicine, cholecystectomy, the 90% of the surgery that is done has no mortality benefit. The American medical industry is $3 trillion in debt for procedures which probably don't need to be done, ranging from Botox injection to joint replacement. None of them have mortality benefit. I do not know why we are, pillaring ourselves, there is no mortality benefit with this. We are all aware that quality of life and improvement in the symptoms are, an important part of why we practice medicine. We need to make our patients' lives better. Not being able to save everybody for a 35-year-old who has, an acute coronary syndrome, I think mortality is, it takes and destroys a family. We just can't look at just that one thing. So, I don't think that is the end point. It's just that.
Second point which I want to address is what you mentioned about the literature, availability of the studies and availability of the data, the way they are peer reviewed. I think in the last 18 months that has been exposed very, very well, whether it was the Lancet articles or anywhere else, and even in the left main study which came along. So it's high time we need to sit down and discuss about physician guided trials. rather than sponsored trials only. So I think medicine, for that matter, is at the crossroads. Even big journals with 200 years of reputation have had to withdraw articles, or issue apologies, or do something like that. So this is demanding, too much control of industry on not only the practice of medicine, but also on publication of medicine, on trial carrying out, on faculty positions in large conferences, on board of directors on large conferences. So all that thing is being controlled by industry, which probably is not a very good idea, and that exposes everyone.
Absolutely.
I think it's a time, thought leaders got together, address that elephant in the room also.
Absolutely. That is absolutely.
Dr. Biraji, you have any thoughts on that?
Couldn't agree more. You are muted, sir. So your thoughts have to be heard. You have to unmute first.
Biraji?
Yeah, guys, no. I'm quietly listening to you both. That's it.
You have changed a lot in the last 20 years.
Yes.
Quietly and listening were never in your dictionary. Maybe Nani has made,
Yeah, both are.
Nani has made all the difference. Great.
But
Somebody
anyway, quality of life takes precedence over mortality. That's for sure. Whichever procedure gives a better quality of life must be practiced. Evidence will come for sure at a later date. That's my only comment.
As Osler said, sir, cure sometimes, but comfort always.
Yeah, that's right.
Or sometimes relief, often comfort always.
I believe, as long as you have very well-defined goals, and those goals are discussed with the patient very clearly and objectively put on the ground, then probably you can go ahead on that. You shouldn't promise the moon to the patient. Patient, if you ask the moon, you should refuse the moon. So that is important. So therefore, very realistic goals, and upfront they should be defined and they should be objectively discussed. As long as you do that, the conscience is clear, patient, and there is good faith with which it is done, then the evidence comes and is taken care. Occasionally, you may be working at the cutting edge thing that can happen in a situation, a new technique you're describing, a new procedure you're describing. Then you have to document it, publish it, and show it in a peer-reviewed journal or peer-reviewed conference that this is what my experience is, whether it is of 10 patients or 15 patients. Present it at multiple conferences and take it from there on. But that has to be very clearly demonstrated that this is the way I'm going about it. That is how science will progress. Unfortunately, in India, most of the science is repetition of what has been done elsewhere. But there can be innovative techniques and procedures which can be done at individual level, at institute level, and at a group level also. But they have to be carried out in a scientific way, which is well reproducible and which is presentable and which can be judged and analyzed. So as long as you're doing it, I think that's the way.
So, sir, Bali sir, you need to write more.
I write on Afghanistan and other places and cricket. No, I think this time has come. There should be one or two lectures should be dedicated to these areas as well. Somebody has to address the amount of influence industry has. You cannot progress without industry. Every innovation takes place in industry. The last trial required millions of dollars. R&D requires so much of money. But there has to be very, very clear addressing this point that this much has not shown. So it has to be what we call as the conflict of interest. Conflict of interest has to be taken care out of the field of medicine. That will only occur if the thought leaders speak out. Unfortunately, that is not happening as strongly as it should be happening. Every millimeter given is a huge loss. So you have to reclaim the literature, you have to reclaim the journals, you have to reclaim the scientific bodies, you have to reclaim the board membership, you have to reclaim the faculty member, you have to reclaim the lectures, the invited lectures which are given, the orations which are given. These must be guided only by academic and scientific. They should not be what you call as a quid pro. That unless we do that, there is problem. I hope I made my points clear.
Absolutely. Crystal. No, I couldn't agree more. Sir. It's true. It is absolutely true. And we are all tarred with the same brush, I feel. So it is time for us to introspect and see how we can clean up our act actually.
We talk about Padma awards, we talk about even Nobel Prize being given for non-academic reasons. We talk about so many things. But in a scientific organization, we have to be clear. No oration must be given because somebody. Whoever that somebody is. It must be earned with hard labor, earned with knowledge, earned with capabilities. It should be above that. These days you have a Lancet, membership is available for a consideration.
For a price.
Unfortunate. So that is the problem. And if everybody is raising fingers on medical profession, this is because of the fact that we are not able to set that issue in order. Anyway, we took it to a different angle.
Out of syllabus.
The CTO, the wire has gone out of the invitation. Great. Keep up the good work.
I'll be requesting, sir, everyone to post their cases so that they can just privately send it to me. In the last session, after the Dr. Surya Prakash session, we'll have one session where we'll have these cases being discussed, what went wrong or what should have been done. So
Smith, maybe every session we can show one or two cases. Don't wait for all of them together.
That can be also done. That's a good suggestion.
Because, yeah.
So I'll request everyone that could be shared and we can have one or two.
Yeah, because we may not have Dr. Bali next time. Somebody else may not be there. Whoever is there can see, and
Yes,
it will be great fun.
Yeah.
To see what they think.
That is a good suggestion. I think for today, sir, we can try to close.
Thank you.
Right, sir. Let's go back to the match.
Right, sir. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Good night, doctor. Good night, sir. Good night, Dr. Miraji. Nice seeing you. Right, Smith. Bye-bye.
Good night. Good night. Good night. Bye-bye.